So let's see about logging. So just to get an idea, who thinks they're not doing enough around their logging at the moment? Okay. Well, okay. So I guess you've come to the right talk. Let's see where we can take this. So I assume most of you have some kind of logging strategy which might be monolog. Who's using monolog? Okay. My examples will also be based on monolog, so you will probably find yourself in those. But there are other solutions as well. Doesn't really matter. Like, we want to get our logs out of our applications. And, well, we often log a lot, and then we say, well, this is fine. And nobody really knows what is going on in our logs. And who's still using grep to find something in the logs? Okay, or who's using tailf? Okay. Well, how good or how well is that working out? Okay-ish. Okay, you find stuff. Every now and then it works well. Sometimes it doesn't work that well. Sometimes you might have this problem that you have this smallish log file, and then you have like a bigger problem around like ending up being the little submarine on top to try to find what is going on there. So that is the general problem we might have. And at some point we might figure out that this is no longer fine and everything is kind of on fire and we want to fix stuff. That's the general sentiment we might have. So let's say we want to log all the things and see where we can take this. So I work for Elastic, the company behind Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana. We're pretty widely used for logging. That's why we often see like people struggling and doing weird stuff around logging. And that's why we try to talk about like what could you do or what might be patterns that make sense for not just our tools, but lots of other tools, because these are pretty widely applicable. How do you work with if you have containerized applications, or what happens if you use Kubernetes? Like, how do you get to your logs and how do you work with your logs? Because as soon as you have something that is more ephemeral, like Docker, you probably don't want to use tailf anymore, because when you want to investigate something, the container might already be gone again. So you might need some more tooling around that, and that's where we want to go. Just a 1-minute intro. Who's heard of our stack? Who is using our stack? Who is using some other centralized logging? What, out of interest? Loggly, okay, so logging as a service. Graylog, anybody? Splunk? Stackdriver from Google, okay, as a service, okay. So the specific implementations will vary a bit, but the general idea is often the same. Also, so coming back to our stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana. I guess most of you know that Elasticsearch to store, Logstash to get and enrich the data. What do I mean when I say enrich? Why would I want to enrich my logs? Yes, exactly. Context might be something. So enrichment could be I have an IP address and I want to get the geolocation of that. Or, for example, I want to enrich it with the Docker metadata or the Kubernetes metadata to see where this is coming from and then be able to drill down and find the right stuff. So that kind of enrichment is adding metadata to my logs. And then you could visualize it in Kibana. By the way, we've recently added, or recently, 3 years ago, added beats, which is like a lightweight agent or shipper to get to your logs, because Logstash always had this nasty problem. It started off as Ruby and is now JRuby. And you probably don't want to put the JVM on your servers just for logging. Ruby is written in, Beats is written in Go, so you have native binaries. You don't have that problem there. The problem is there is no B in ELK. What do? Well, we try this. You can see it's a B, it's an ELK. We call it the BELK or the ELK B. But the problem was this was not very scalable, because what happens if we add another product, we get another letter. It will be very hard to make up another animal, whatever the next letter would be. So we kind of skipped that, and this is not really official. We have some stickers for that, but it's not really that official. We just now call it Elastic Stack because that's more scalable. We might have to add some colored square in there, but otherwise it's kind of the same thing. So what that means in the end is you can use a beat like file beat for logs files, which is like tailf over the network, but on steroids kind of, and I will show you a bit why. You can take that to tail your log files, forward that to Logstash to parse it and enrich it, and then potentially store it in Elasticsearch, or I go to beats directly to Elasticsearch and skip Logstash. That's also possible in some scenarios, and then Kibana to visualize it. So let's see a hello world application of monitoring. And obviously, we'll do this live. So, and this is all containerized. So let's start that in the background because it might take up a minute to start. Who knows Docker and Docker Compose? OK, cool. Then everybody knows what we are talking about. So what I have for my demo is I have a very simple application, and my application will do some logging. This is super simple. So we basically have a loop from 1 to 20. We will log something. We will always put out the debug statement to count the iteration count here. If the number can be divided by 15, we'll have an exception. If it can be divided by 5, we'll have an error. By 3, we have a warn, and otherwise we have an info. What pattern do we have here? Who has recently done job interviews? FizzBuzz rings a bell, where depending on where you are, like it can be divided by 15 or 5 or 3, it will output fizz or buzz. And I've kind of created FizzBuzz for logging, not because it makes much sense, but just to get some logs out of that. Now, the more interesting question is, how many log events or log lines should we get out of this? Who is for 19? Who is for 20? Who is for 38? Who is for 40? Who is for more? Well, let's say we go from 1 to equals to 20, so we will have 20 loop iterations. Every loop count will give us a debug statement, and then we will have one of these. So in total, it should be 40 log lines or log events that we collect. Remember the 40 because we will get back to that, and we'll see some problems around that. And up here, we'll get into those. We have various log formatters of how to get the data out and then access those. And then we have all of this running in Docker Compose. So here, basically, I have my application. I say, for example, this is my FizzBuzz application, and it's not sure about if that is really production, but we say that this is a production application. And then we just log that, and we'll access the log afterwards. And I set up the rest of the stack. That doesn't really matter so much, but we have some other stuff running to interact with that log. And while I have been talking, hopefully that entire stack has come up. So I'll use PHP and Monolog. If you use any other language, like pretty much any language has a proper log appender, so the same principles will apply. So whatever you do, you just have one single place normally where you define this is how we log and how we get to stuff. And you don't do any weird echo or println to get to your logs, right? So we don't want to use echo. Why are we not just using echo or println or something like that to get logs? Maybe because we want log levels. And where we can tune, like maybe in production we only want to get warn messages, but for local development we also want to see debug messages. You could change that. I'll stick to, well, the generally defined log statements as you've seen in the application already. There's also the IETF standard defining like what should be used when, but I won't cover that today. The second kind of thing we don't want to have is coupling. So what we don't want to have is my application is logging something, and then I have my centralized logging system, and I have very tight coupling between them. So probably my application shouldn't even know about that central logging application. Because what if I want to replace it? I probably don't want to change my code just because I changed my logging solution. And we'll see that sometimes this is a problem that you have too tight coupling between the systems, both at development time, but also at runtime when something goes wrong. And you don't want to have that. So the first thing is we could go for the good old parsing approach, which basically means we write out a log file, we collect that, and then we see what happens in there, right? So what we have is I run my application in my Docker container. I have filebeat tailing that file, which is basically just forwarding it. I want to parse it with logstash to get some information out of that, and then I just store it. But whatever you use, you generally want to tail the log file, forward it. You don't have to parse it, but generally you want to parse it. Why do you want to parse your log file? Yeah, just shout. Well, yeah, the data enriching is one part, but the parsing could just mean that you want to extract the log levels, and then you can more perform, or in a more performant way, filter down, just give me the errors. Or you extract the timestamp, and then you just say, like, give me all the messages for this specific timestamp. Because if you don't extract the information, you can basically only scroll through the events. Maybe you can do a grep, but that will be very imperformant on a large amount of logs. So you don't have to, but in many cases, it makes sense to extract some information from your logs. Or you could use that to graph it out. So you could, for example, graph out afterwards, like, how many errors did I have over time? And then you could see, like, in 1 hour intervals, like, how many errors do I have on my site? And you might want to have that. That's why you probably want to parse. So how do I get my logs out of my Docker container? So I have, my Docker container is writing to a file. Let's go to our application again. So I have my application, and I'm using this one here. So my application is writing to logsapp.log. And that's running inside my container. How do I get that out to my centralized logging system? So you could put the thing that is forwarding the files into your container. Is that very elegant? Not really. It will make your containers larger. You have a second process running there. It's not really what you want. Also, if you want to update that forwarding thing, if you bake it into your application, you will need to redeploy your application. So you don't really want that. Bless you. What we want to have instead is, or what I'm doing here is, I'm writing out my log to logs app, and then in my Docker Compose file, I take that log app folder, put it into logs on the host, and then mount it into the sidecar. So I run the thing that forwards the logs as a sidecar, and just run that once per host, and it can forward the logs from there. So basically what I do is, from within my container, I put the logs into my logs folder, and this one here, you can see this is the log output that I have. I have been running that application a couple of times. That's why you see more log output by now. But this is the log output that we have. And then we take that and forward it from a sidecar. So we basically mount that file into the sidecar to do the forwarding as well. So what we have here is, from our PHP application, we mount the logs to the whatever folder you have, and then you mount it into the sidecar to forward the logs. And then in there, you basically just tail anything that has this logs folder or ends in logs, and you just forward that. And then you can get that. And then you can get the metadata for that as well. But let's see, first off, let's see if everything came up correctly. So I have forwarded my data, and this should be working. Let's look at index management. And index management is showing us how many events we have collected, for example. So we can see parse is the pattern that I'm looking at right now. And it tells me that I have 43 log events. How many log events were we expecting? 40. Not so great. We can see structure, which is another approach we'll look at later on. That one has 40. That one is correct. Parse has 43. Any guesses why I might have 43 log events? This is not super or as common in PHP as in other languages, but sometimes for better readability, you want to have multi-line statements. So for example, here, this is basically one event. So you can see when I have an error, I say investigate tomorrow, and then on a new line, I might add some additional meta information here. So basically, I have a second line. Is that line on its own very useful? Probably not. It's pretty much like if you have a stack trace and you break up the stack trace, one line of a stack trace is pretty useless. What do you assume is easier, combining a stack trace back together or not breaking it up in the first place? Not breaking it up is much easier. It's pretty much like if you have a piece of meat and put it through a grinder and have the hashed meat, putting that back together into the original piece of meat will be much harder than the other way around. And it's pretty much the same with log events. So what you want to have is basically you want to say, like, I want to figure out what is one log event and not break that up in the first place. How could I figure out what is one log event here in this example? Yeah, but the line 151 doesn't have a timestamp. Yeah, so the general idea is what ideally you have is you can have an easy pattern where you say every new log event starts with one character, for example, the square bracket, and everything that doesn't start with the square bracket belongs to the previous line for this specific pattern here. Your patterns could look totally different. This is just something you will need to define. But my assumption I will build on now here is that when I have something with a square bracket, it will be a new log event. If I don't have that, I have the continuation of the previous one. And what you need to do then is this one here. What you need to do is you will need, when you collect that, you will need to say this is a multi-line statement and this is the right pattern to combine that or not break it up in the first place, basically. So what I say is I take all the log files from that file, but only if something is starting with a square bracket, then it's a new line. Otherwise, it's the continuation of the previous one. You could, by the way, also exclude or include specific lines based on patterns here, but I'm not doing that. So you could, for example, say I'm logging to my file on trace, but I only want to centralize 1 or above because otherwise it might be too much. You could already do that in the forwarder and filter out there. OK, so I will update that. That should update in the background automatically. I want to restart my application. What do I do? Let's do it the simple way. Let's say I have my PHP application. Somewhere I have my PHP application, that is the ID, and then I do a Docker restart of that specific application. This just runs through once and then it's done, and it will output my events. How many events should we have in that index now in total, ideally? 83, hopefully, if everything works correctly, because we had 43 from the previous one, and now we should just add 80. So if I reload that, you know, demos and everything, you never know what happens. But you can see this one now seems to work because we have 83, like we added 40, so that's good. And that one seems to be working as well. So the next step then is to parse. If I look at my log file here, let's say I have this log line and I want to parse it. How do I parse something? Yes, how do I extract the fields? Like, how do I get the timestamp and the log level and the message and everything out in individual fields? Yes, regular expressions. Who likes writing regular expressions? OK, I guess that's the Stockholm syndrome, right? Where you got so used to writing regular expressions all day long that you start liking it. Yeah, you can use XSLT if you really want to. If you want to work with XML all the time, yeah. That's something you could do. I'm not sure I want to go there today. So what you can do is, and how to make it actually easier to work with regular expressions, we have this, it's called a grok debugger. Basically what you can do is you can add a line of sample data here, and then you can provide a grok pattern to try that out. Grok is basically a named regular expression, because you don't always want to redefine all the patterns yourself. So what a grok pattern looks like is, let's go to GitHub to show that. Grok patterns are basically predefined regular expressions. So for example, you can say an email address, rather than saying this is the part of an email address, I will just use email address, and it then will reuse the right regular expression in the background. So it's just named parts that you can reuse, or you can write your own. So how do we parse this? How do we start? Those who said they like writing regular expressions, it's your time now. Yeah, now let's actually say, like, we start the line, backslash, yeah, that's a good start. Square bracket, so we have escaped the square bracket. Yeah, so what you need to do is to access the grok pattern, you need to say percentage square curly brace open, and then we need to find the right time or pattern for that timestamp. And I think, so we can scroll down, and they're here. Here are the various timestamps, and I think I need to check. Yeah, that looks good. Let's try this one. So what you do is you take this one, then you put a colon, and then you say, I want to put this in a specific field. The convention we normally use is at timestamp, but it doesn't really matter. So if I simulate it now, you can see, okay, we have extracted that. How do we continue? So we need to close the square bracket. That's what I normally forget, and then it doesn't work. Then we have a space. There is one nice trick to work with spaces. You can just do this one, space, and that will eat any white space. So that could be one or more spaces or one or more tabs, and it will eat all of them. And since I don't have space here, it will basically eat it up and throw it away. So this will just kind of like use it or collect it, but it will not put it in a field, because where would we put a space? We don't care about the space. Then we could say we need to escape the curly brace. The memory part we'd probably throw away. This is the memory usage of the process while we were running this. This was, since some of you said they're using Monolog, I guess you know these concepts. There is this push processor where you can, for example, say how to enrich something. That might be, if you have users that log into your system, you might add that as structured information to all your logs to say like, hey, this is the user. And if a user later on complains that they had an error, you could just look up that user email address or username or whatever. You could put all kinds of information like process IDs. I'm using the memory here. There is a memory usage processor, but that gives you a formatted string, so that would give you 2 MB. And 2 MB is not very good for sorting afterwards, for example. So I want the raw number, so that's why I just call the raw memory get usage and put that in a field. And that will end up in a field memory. And that's how we got that here. Do you want to see me write the whole line of regular expression? Let's not go there, okay? So it's like a good cooking show where you have prepared something. I have prepared the regular expression that should work here. Let's try that out. We'll paste it in. And then when we simulate it, this is what you get out. So you can see we get a timestamp out. So this works. We get the application. We get the logging level. We get the memory usage. So we could draw that out afterwards to say, for example, this is the memory usage of my application. And then I have the message, whatever was that message. Oh, and I actually see that this could be improved by I could trim the white space here, and the colon white space here should also be escaped. But that's just the joy of regular expressions and doing that. And by the way, this stack trace thing here, that is the right pattern to collect the multi-line. So if we go for one of the multi-lines, this one here, this should be correctly combined. So if I use that example here, you see we have the message, investigate tomorrow, and then stack trace not that urgent, or whatever other lines you have after that. Bless you. So this is how you can parse that apart. One other thing that is very important often is emojis. We do support emojis all the way. So you will be able to find the emoji back in the visualization afterwards as well. And you could even sort by the emoji, for example. Where you could extract the field user experience, and you could code the user experience with emojis and then sort by the emojis or filter down on the emojis. So if I had, oops, I don't want to commit it right now. If I had over to discover, and we have the parse index here, we see this is when we got 40 events. I need to go back a little longer in time because I've been talking too much already. So if I update that, you can see these were the 40 when we corrected the multi-line pattern. These were the 43 when we had the wrong multi-line pattern. And then when I open one of these up here, you can see we have extracted the right stuff. So we have, for example, a log level, and could then see here, these are all the log levels we have. And I could then filter down and say, just give me the alerts. When I click on that little plus here, it will add a filter, just filter down on the alert log level. And you can see the emoji is still there. Everything works as expected. Okay, so that was Grok, and that's a totally valid choice. I've shown you Grok debugger. We have something new, by the way. If you don't like writing Grok patterns, and I haven't tried that on that pattern yet, let me try that for the first time. We'll see how well that works. So we have something, it's like AutoGrok. You can upload a log file, and it will try to parse it for you. So if I go to the PHP logging, logs, log, I upload my file, and it should try to analyze my log, and it will say, okay, I found something like I found 200 lines, and this is the log pattern that I think might make sense here. So you don't have to start writing a regular expression yourself, but it will basically give you a starting point. And you can see memory, okay, that was useless. You can see this was how much memory we used, so that was extracted correctly. You can see we got the log levels, we extracted the timestamps, and that's the entire message. So we got like a starting point to parse this. This will make your life much easier, this autogrok. So if you don't like writing regular expressions, this is where I would get started. Yes, but I don't want to take away grok from those who really like it. Okay, so the good thing is you can just use, if you have your classic log files, you can just keep using and doing what you have always been doing. The downside is multi-line statements might be a pain, like don't break them up, otherwise you will just have garbage in your logs. Regular expressions need to be written, and you have a bit of coupling, because every time you change the log format in your application, you will change the grok pattern to kind of parse it apart correctly. So if I add a new field for user experience or something like that, I will need to add that to grok to properly parse it. So you have a bit of coupling here. Not terribly, but a bit. So what could you do instead? You could send it directly. So for example, you could have a special log appender, and you could send either to Logstash or to Elasticsearch directly. Does Monolog support that? Yes. A lot of them, actually. There are many options. If you go to the documentation, you will see many. I will have one example, but I have actually commented it out because there's one major downside to that, or one reason why I don't like that. So what you could do, for example, here is you could have an Elasticsearch appender where you send directly to Elasticsearch. Or there are lots of others. For example, maybe the ones using Graylog are using GELF, the Graylog extended logging format. Are you using UDP or TCP? Probably UDP. Yeah. By default, it would be UDP. UDP is nice because it's very lightweight. And what is the downside? Yeah, it's just gone. Like if the destination is not there, it will be just vanishing immediately. And that is one of the tricky parts. Normally, you care most for your log messages when, for example, the network is not doing well and your application might be doing badly. And exactly then, you will not get any log messages. And you have this coupling because your application needs to know where is the destination. You could also put it to Elasticsearch. That would then be HTTP and TCP. What happens if the destination is down? No, the application hopefully doesn't stop. That would be really bad. Like that would be the worst dependency you could have. I actually haven't tried it out. Does it block or does it buffer it for some time? It depends on the log appender. Yeah, true. It's the client. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a dependency that's not good. I would not, yeah, that's what the reason why I would not do that. In case of outages and general coupling, that's why I have commented it out and didn't even try it out, because you have too much dependency or coupling. And you might lose the log messages when you want them the most, or you might kill your application, but you probably also don't want when your destination is down. So I would be careful doing that. Don't go there. What might be an alternative? We don't want to write regular expressions, but we still want to have like proper delivery of data. Yes, shout.
Maybe like JSON format kind of.
Yes, writing structured logs is kind of a good way if you can. So it can be JSON, and for example, for our stack, JSON is the ideal thing because Elasticsearch stores JSON directly as well. It could be also CSV, which will be very easy to parse afterwards. You just extract the header line and then whatever fields you have in there. That's also much easier to parse. Or if you can, directly JSON is a good option. So you can just structure that. So basically what you then have is you have the structured log file, you have the beat tailing it, but we don't need Logstash anymore because we don't need any parsing. We can just take the JSON and put it into Elasticsearch directly. And the only change that you need to do is you will need to mount the JSON file correctly, but then you just need to say like, well, this is a JSON file. Handle it accordingly. And just to give you the idea what that looks like, here you have app.json. Once I got the comment that this is not a proper JSON file because it contains a lot of JSON lines. That is true, you could just call the file log as well, but to make it easier for myself and the picking up of the logs, like the one called log, I will parse. The one ending in .json, I will not parse and assume it's JSON lines. But each one of them is a single line. And you have everything structured here. So if you head over to the structure one, that's now in the structure index, and let's get rid of that alert. And I want to head over to structure. You can see here we had 40 events, here we had 40 events. We didn't have any multi-line panes as well. And if I open that up, you can see you have level, for example, as a numeric value, and level underscore name has the proper name here. And you have all the parts. You have, for example, the message. That's all there. By the way, does anybody know where this is coming from? What is host? Why do I have host information in here? That's an enrichment the Beat is doing. It's one of the metadata providers we could do. It could also do enrichment for cloud providers, Docker, Kubernetes. I'm just using the host here because maybe the operating system makes a difference, but you can just leave that out as well. But it's just enriching the events. But here, we've basically just tailed the JSON file into Elasticsearch, and we're done. So if you can do that, that's a really nice approach to handle your logs. So it's the right format. Sometimes people complain that JSON serialization is a bit hard, or like overhead might be a bit more than just a classical log line. But normally it's not that bad. Like if you can, this is the approach that I would recommend to use. Okay, now, what happens if you use a container? Where do you log if you have a container? Do you want to write to a file still? But if I write to a file and I write it into the container, then I always need to mount that file out of the container and mount it into the sidecar. Is it very elegant? And it's also not very flexible if I have like lots of containers coming up, going away, and I always need to have these file mounts. It's kind of a pain in the ass, right? Where do I write my Docker logs instead? Or what is the default? Sorry? Yeah, named pipe, or you can just write it to system out. I will just make it easy. Just write it to system out, and then it will end up in a Docker default JSON log, and you can collect it from there. So what my application does is, so by the way, this was the one for the JSON format. You just have a JSON formatter, and then you just say like, this is the JSON file where this should end up. What you can do for Docker is here, I'm just saying like, I just stream to standard out, and it will then end up in the default Docker log, and I can tail that basically in my sidecar. How does my sidecar get access to these logs which are on the host? Well, I need to mount it again. So just to give you the idea, what we are doing here is, so we have filebeat Docker, filebeat Docker for Elasticsearch. What you need to do is, this is where on my host, the default Docker log ends up in var-lib Docker containers. And I mount that in the same location into the sidecar, and then the sidecar can just forward those logs. Another thing that I do here is I mount the socket into that sidecar. Any ideas why I might want to do that? Because that's what I use for enrichment. Basically, I will use the Docker socket because in the path in this one here, I have the Docker ID. And then we will basically take that Docker ID, throw it against the Docker API, and extract all the metadata we can from that socket, and then enrich the events with the Docker metadata. And you can also make that a little easier in that one here. Where is my, if I found the right configuration file. No, this is not the one I wanted. Where is, sorry, I think I have too many tabs open. Where did I put my file? Anyway, there is a, like, I think I have it in my slides as well. it's fine. So first off, I assume we all use Docker. We have the container, or we have a sidecar running to collect the Docker logs. And what you then basically do is you tail those files. And if you want to have the examples, they are part of the GitHub repository of FileBeat as well. But I'll show you what is the most important. This is the file I was looking for. I have it somewhere in there because otherwise it wouldn't be working. So basically what you do here, instead of saying I tail a specific file, I say I have Docker and I want to get data from Docker. And then if you have mounted the socket, you can add the Docker metadata as well. And what you would get then out of that data, thanks to the metadata, a log line might look something like this. And you will get, for example, you see that this is the PHP application, and this is PHP logging is the project, and for example, the container version and everything. This is all you can get. You can enrich all your events. There is one very nice feature, by the way, here is, and I have that in my Docker Compose file here, if you have multi-line statements here, you probably don't want to configure that statically and say like this specific container and has that multi-line configuration. What I do here instead is I add a label on the container. So this is my PHP application because the PHP application knows how it is logging. And this one here is just some metadata and the FileBeat will pick that up. So it will know this would be, I don't need it in that example, but this would be how I collect multi-lines from that container. So it's a bit of an inversion of control. Rather than explicitly configuring like this is how to get data here and how to handle it, the container contains the metadata of how its logs should be processed. And you just add a label on the container and it stays with the container all the time. And the FileBeat can apply that pattern automatically. So that is very convenient if you just move around containers and have different versions and different patterns and everything. You just bake it into the container image and then it will be applied automatically and you're done. Okay, since we're running low on time, let me go on with that. Sometimes you're missing the last log line from Docker. It's because Docker doesn't always add a new line at the very end. And the FileBeat always waits for a new line to collect the line, because otherwise it's not sure if it's done. There could be something else coming in there. So sometimes you have like 39 log events rather than 40. Don't be confused by that. We have seen the hints. One thing that is important is you want to keep the state of what you have forwarded from your logs out of your container. Because what happens if you replace that container because there is a new version of FileBeat? If you would just restart that, it would start collecting everything from your Docker default log from the start. And then you would have lots of duplicate messages. Whereas we have this, it's called a registry. It's basically a pointer. What have we collected in each file already? If you keep that on the host, we will not collect it the second time when we replace the container, because we still have the marker, basically how far did we get and what has already been collected. Yeah, you could put that data into a specific PHP index, because by default, something that might be very confusing at first is there's another view here for those who said that they like tailf. This is the tailf view, but I need to change where it's coming from, and it's coming from Docker. Let me change that here, Docker. Now you can see I have a lot of events here. This will be hundreds of events. But I can, for example, say application, or no, sorry, let's say container.name is, and then it shows me all the containers that I have running. For example, I say I'm just interested in the PHP application. And if you filter down on that, and if my UI would let me, oh no, it's already working. And now you just have only the PHP application. And you could even live stream that. So if I run my container again, sorry, this one, it would just live stream. This is pretty much like tailf, but over a network. So you might have a 1 second delay or so until you see the data. But in a moment, we should have a new timestamp of logs streaming in here, hopefully. Come on. Yeah, okay, you see now it jumped and we have a 26 timestamp. So this is basically the live stream of the logs coming into your application. Okay, so sometimes you have unknown fields because they have never seen before by Kibana, then you need to refresh your index pattern for that one. That's also a common thing that you might run into. Some applications try to be fun and have this ASCII art when they start, like Redis. Is that very helpful for centralized logging? Not really. So what you can do is, here we have a template, and I basically say, if something is a Redis container, then apply this rule here. And the rule down here is exclude the lines, and this is the regular expression to exclude ASCII art. So this is how we would get rid of any ASCII art that any Redis container is putting into our logs, and just filter that out. One interesting aspect is FileBeat is also logging to the default Docker logs. So it's trying to collect its own logs. What if you have an error in FileBeat, in the FileBeat configuration? Then you would have a loop, because then you try to collect something, you run into an error, you log an error, but then you try to collect your own error. And you would have that loop. How do you break out of the loop? The one container in my Docker setup that is not logging to the default Docker JSON log is FileBeat itself. That one I put to a file so I can debug that outside, and I don't have this logging loop. So basically, who logs the logger? You need a different approach, because if you have a bug there, you will not see the problems in that. It would be a loop. So it's the hot stuff, but Docker adds some complexity and chances. You need to use them wisely. So, anybody using Kubernetes? Okay, that's not that many anymore. So, where do you put your FileBeat? In a daemon set, you have it running once on every host. We also have examples for that. What you can do basically is you can, if it's running as part of your cluster, you can say, get the Kubernetes metadata from the API. If you install FileBeat on the host directly, this is how you could find the API to get the metadata. And then basically you would have stuff like you have the node name, you have the namespace, you have the pod. All of that would be in your logs, and you could filter down on that if you're just interested in a specific namespace, for example. You can add more metadata, but that's probably going too far for today. You can get rid of the ASCII art again. Same approach. Again, we're relying on the Kubernetes metadata. So here, anything that we put in the Redis namespace, we'll try to run stuff through that exclude lines. What you could do, for example, as well, which is kind of nice, is if you have different namespaces in Kubernetes, you could put your logs or have a different index on a per namespace level. So you could say, like, if I have a Kubernetes namespace, use this one. If I don't have a Kubernetes namespace, then use FileBeat. And then we can add the beat version, so upgrades won't be painful. And then we could have, for example, a day for daily index patterns. Even hotter, but even more complex. By the way, sometimes people say, I just want to collect my Apache or Nginx access logs. You don't have to configure much anymore, because we figured out this is a very common concern. What you need to do is you need to tell FileBeat, well, there is a module. Just collect everything for Apache or Nginx, because it will know on your operating system what is the default location for those files and what they look like by default, and it will just collect and process them correctly. So that is all you need to do. You don't need to specify files and regular expressions and stuff like that. That will make your life much easier to collect those. Cool. To wrap up, I haven't pushed my code yet, I think, but I will push my code to this URL. This is the one place where all the code will live, and I will tweet it out afterwards. These are the patterns we have seen. Kind of pick the right ones you want. If you have more questions, just find me afterwards. Thank you.